Hi, my name's Dr. Greg Canning. I want my fellow Australians and the rest of the world to know that the groups that try and tell you that domestic violence is mostly about men beating on women are lying to you. And in many cases, they're scamming you. Domestic violence is something both men and women do in roughly equal measures. And those who suffer the most are the children. In Australia, you will hear repeated often at the moment that one woman is killed by a partner or ex-partner each week. But the same data source actually shows that one man is killed every 10 days in a domestic homicide. It is claimed that domestic violence has its roots in gender inequality. So how can the solution be more gender inequality by only recognising and assisting female victims? You can't fix sexism with more sexism any more than you can fix hate with more hate. Let's support an inclusive solution to domestic violence and stop violence against everyone. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Canning, thank you. That was a very moving and powerful statement there. And we're going to make sure that that is seen by a lot of people. Hopefully as many Australians and people in the United States, Canada, the UK, etc. Have you got time for a few questions?
Absolutely. Go for it.
I'm glad that you made that statement. You're not the only Australian who's made it. We've talked to people at the 1 in 3 campaign. We've talked to people at the Lone Fathers Association. We have talked to people at something called supportforguys.com, who counsels men, and they all say the same thing. Domestic violence is not a gendered issue. And well, I don't need to ask you if you agree because you just said so, right? What got you interested in this subject, Dr. Canning?
When I was a young doctor, I got involved in medical education, and one of the first sessions I presented back in the mid-80s was a session on domestic violence. And I think I, like everyone else at the time, assumed that domestic violence was just men abusing women. But through my professional career, it became very apparent that that's not the case. In a general practice, you deal with lots of families, you see how they interact, and you can see before you, when you have couples present, that there's aggression on both sides. And certainly I've seen the consequences for both male and female victims of violence and abuse of all types, you know. I suspect that given men don't report it as often as women, that it's a much bigger problem than we think.
Well, what's interesting is that I've looked at the figures on the 1 in 3 campaign, and they claim that 1 in 3 victims of domestic violence are abused, meaning 2 out of 3 women are, 1 out of 3 men are, which all by itself, let's assume we accept that figure, then why are there practically no campaigns and no government awareness programs to help that 1 in 3? As far as I can tell, in Australia, there are almost none.
That's true. There's a 1300 helpline that you can call, but if you approach any of the established DV services, then a male phoning in or trying to contact them will almost certainly be made to believe that it's actually his problem, that he's a perpetrator, and that maybe what abuse he felt he was suffering was self-defence or retaliation or whatever. The domestic violence system in Australia is dominated by feminist ideas about domestic violence, the gendered model from Duluth. And even if you search the newspapers for advertisements for people to work in domestic violence services, almost always it will say that they must have a feminist perspective on the problem. So
why would you need an ideological perspective to help people who are hurt?
Because that's the ideology that controls the system.
All right. I'm going to get right to it then. There's a group called White Ribbon Australia, not affiliated with whiteribbon.org, not affiliated with you, but White Ribbon Australia, the White Ribbon Campaign. They're asking men to take a pledge to end violence against women. And we've looked into it. This organization spends practically no money actually helping victims of domestic violence. They collect several $1 million a year, basically telling men not to hit women. And that appears to be all they do. You see that as an effective approach or use of money?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, domestic violence, family violence is a relationship issue. So the prime focus needs to be on relationships. What White Ribbon does is it automatically assumes that the perpetrator is one gender, the victim is another gender. Therefore, it's the problem of the perpetrator. Let's not fix the relationship. Let's actually break the relationship apart and cause more tension between men and women. The understanding of domestic violence is very nuanced these days. We understand that there are relationship problems, communication problems, problems with employment, poverty, drug abuse, mental illness. It's a very multifaceted, complicated thing. And you can't just say that it's men against women. It's people who are trying to get on together, who are dysfunctioning in their ability to get on together. And I think the best solution is to try and facilitate them to manage their relationships in more effective ways so that they can do what they want to do. There is absolutely no prospect of a couple who are having a problem with violence, and we know that in violent relationships, in at least 50%, it's a mutual problem. There's no option in the feminist-dominated DV industry for couples who are mutually violent to undergo counselling to improve their relationship. A wedge will be put between that couple, despite the fact that they're both violent, and the outcome that they want is for the relationship to be broken apart. I don't see that as helping anyone.
Well, let me make sure I underscore that fact. Roughly 50%. This is in Australia, and it's not just in Australia, but Australian figures show this. Figures around the world show this. Roughly half of domestic violence relationships are mutual violence. Now, I'm sure I don't know. I assume you would agree that sometimes separating them is the right goal because nothing else is going to work. But frequently, it's two people who need help overcoming their issues. And then sometimes it's one person who needs help overcoming their issue, but guess what? It's about as likely, more or less, to be the woman who needs the help with her temper issues. I don't think anybody believes women are more violent, but what you just described, cut them away so they're completely separated, whether it's one-sided or mutual. Where do the kids go?
Well, the kids will go with the mother, of course, which then causes more tension. And if mother is violent, the system has it not just sent the children off with an abusive mother? Absolutely. And we know there is a cycle of violence, and the cycle of violence is intergenerational. So people who've grown up in violent atmospheres where they have seen the adults that they've grown up with be violent think that's the normal way to relate. So they will seek out other partners who behave in the same way because they think that's normality.
Right. I think the number one predictor for you growing up to be an abuser is growing up in an abusive household. And if mom was the one hitting you, she's the one who taught you to hit. If it was both of them hitting you or hitting each other, then it's both of them who taught you this. I can see no positive thing out of something that tells men that this is all about them. Do you think people are just afraid to see women as adults, perhaps?
I think the whole feminist idea is that in order for women to get what they believe they should have, they have to be portrayed as perfect. So feminists don't want to see any of the so-called shadow side of women shown to the public because it might damage their quest to achieve what they believe women should have. And Warren Farrell stated it beautifully when he said feminism's been very good at showing the shadow side of men, but won't show the shadow side of women, you know.
That's right. And if we're to, I would dare say that if we are to accept the proposition that feminism is the radical notion that women are people, we won't quibble. Let's just accept that at face value. Then we should be able to accept that women are potentially violent and dangerous and abusive.
Absolutely. And some certainly are.
And some certainly are. And so I don't think the people at White Ribbon Australia or the people behind White Ribbon Day are really thinking hard enough about this. Women are no more evil than men are. Women are not devils, men angels, but you have women beating their children. In fact, most child abuse is committed by women, probably just because of single motherhood being more common, not because women are more innately violent. Stop me anytime you think I'm wrong. Women commit most child abuse. It's just a statistical reality. They're teaching their children that violence is okay. At what point do we ask women to take a pledge? Why don't we all take a pledge not to hit our children and not to be violent around our children?
Absolutely.
I'd
join the campaign right away if it was aimed at stopping violence against everyone by everyone.
There you are.
That's what we should be aiming for. But the fraud of White Ribbon extends into many facets. It's said to be a male-led initiative to stop violence against women, but it's not a male-led initiative at all. It's a feminist-led initiative, and the CEO of Australian White Ribbon is a feminist die-hard. So, you can't say it's a male thing. The males that they get to make the pledge and do the thing, I think a lot of them do it for the publicity and the kudos of being seen to have some social responsibility. I would say they rarely understand any of the nuanced details of what actually goes on in family or domestic violence, or they're tainted by knowing one example where there was a female victim who suffered horrendous violence and generalising that, well, that must be what the whole thing is about. And that's the way they push their propaganda. They'll take the worst cases, put them on the TV in your face, say, this is dreadful, look what this horrible man did. And did you know that 1 in 3 women in Australia will be a victim of domestic violence? So the concept is 1 in 3 women gets that, and they don't. The vast majority of domestic violence is common couple violence. It's minor things that transpire in day-to-day life where the relationship isn't working the way it should be and people are maladaptive, So it's not all that. That's actually a rarity. That horrendous intimate terrorism is a tiny percentage of this great problem of domestic violence. It needs a focus that's... Sorry? It definitely needs a focus that's very driven and serious, but you also need to bring it back to the common couple violence as well.
Yes, I agree with you. We agree. Obviously, we do. But it stuns me too, because you'll hear great stories about really horrible cases like men who kill their children. But what you don't hear is that women kill their children too. So again, children are the ultimate victims of this dysfunctional cycle that goes on. And, again, stop me if you're disagreeing, and I don't think you're going to, Doctor, because I know you've looked at this. But I have a somewhat more charitable interpretation of some of it. While it's clear to me that anybody who looks at White Ribbon Australia's finances knows they're raising money almost entirely to pay salaries to keep spreading the propaganda, and I will call it propaganda, that it's men's fault, it's men's fault, it's men's fault. I think some of the men in this male-led initiative, some of them are dishonest, some of them are in it for the money because there are some people making some good money there, but I think a lot of it are sad men who some of them may be men who saw a horrific case of a woman being abused, but I have a theory some of them were men who experienced violence as children, maybe even at the hands of a woman, and have internalized it and decided that that's their fault anyway. Because I've seen a lot of that in guys. They get beaten by their mother or their girlfriend, and they assume that's their fault.
I mean, the dynamics for the victims, be they male or female, are the same to a large extent,
They really
women often blame themselves for their own abuse, no matter what it is. Men often blame themselves for their own abuse, So
you're located where in Australia again, Dr. Canning?
Townsville, which is North Queensland.
All right. Just
in the tropics.
I'm talking to people all over Australia today and getting this stuff up on YouTube and sending it to some Australian media. Let's go ahead and close this out and let you get back to your workday, Dr. Canning. Did you have
no worries. I have to say, Dean, browsing through Facebook this morning, I saw your post in Huffington Post, and I've seen some of your other recent work that's been put up there, and I congratulate you on making inroads into that bastion of leftist propaganda. with some
I
common sense. So.
I won't even say leftist because I don't think this is a left versus right issue. But Huffington Post has
progressive, maybe.
Huffington Post has been a bastion of closed-mindedness when it comes to feminist subjects and only spouting this party line. And I'm grateful for them for allowing the articles because there's people on the left as well as the right who know something's wrong with this. But thank you for that. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure Australia hears today?
No, just join us all, whiteribbon.org, and stop violence against everyone, please.
Dr. Canning has no direct relationship to whiteribbon.org. That is run by Aaron Fitzy out of the UK. Please, Australia and anybody else, go check that out for an alternative view. Thank you so much, Dr. Canning. Have a great day.
No worries. Have a good day, Dean. Bye.
Bye.